recording up. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. We have two recordings going on
I
now.
really appreciate it. It's very important. There are a couple of situations where I have to send this
Okay.
this presentation. Okay, so as I was saying, that's why I was not able to present it in January as scheduled, and Phil said there was a slot in May, so fine, no problem. Here I am. I will start. Okay, first of all, I like to start with since assertion training is about relationships, we know that good relationships keep us happier and healthier. And there is a 75-year, there are many studies, but there is a 75-year study at the University of Harvard, the longest study of human relationships, that shows three main results as per Dr. Robert Waldinger. He's the fourth director of this study. And he mentions three main results. One, that social connections contribute to live longer. Two, that loneliness is toxic and kills. And three, good relationships protect our brains. So Andrew Salter, with only his Bachelor of Science from NYU, he started his clinical practice in Manhattan in 1943, which he continued for 55 years until a few months before his death in 1996. I will read when we continue, I will read a few lines from his obituary and momentary video view of Andrew Salter when he is interviewed by Gerald Davison. He's a professor of psychology and gerontology at the University of Southern California with a BA in social relations and also a former president of the Association of ABCT. So when you see further, these are some information because you will see that the book on auto-hypnosis was with the help of Clark Hall, who was a researcher in explaining learning by the scientific laws of behavior. So here I start with, why doesn't it, okay. It doesn't scroll.
Well, if it doesn't, try using your up, down, right, left. Use the down arrow. That may work for you.
I'm using that. It's not responding.
Okay. So then use your cursor and see if you know what. Take it off of the major. Take it off of the whole presentation and go back to each slide on the left of it.
I can't do anything. It stopped.
It's totally blocked now, not doing anything?
Totally blocked, yes.
Okay, so you want to use your presentation. So what you should do is stop screen sharing and come back on and start screen sharing again.
Thank you. Okay, there we go. Where did I find it here? Okay, it doesn't, yes, it doesn't have now in the down in the.
Hold on 1 minute. Let me make sure that you're still, because you're still a co-host. Yeah, you're still a co-host. So now you should be able to screen share as you did initially. Does that work?
Let me see. Share.
There you go.
Okay, I think so. Yes. Yes.
Okay, now see if you can move it.
I can move it. Thank you very much. I hope this is all. Okay, great. I'll continue then. So I want to do the disclosures, which I mentioned before, that the archives from the Association of ABCT facilitated or gave me the interview with Jerry Davison, which I already returned. They have obituary that Jerry Davison wrote in the Behavior Therapist, which is our newsletter, says one of the paragraph. Those of us who knew Salter personally appreciated his sheer brilliance, his wit, his warmth, decency, and consideration for others, his supportiveness, his keen intuitive grasp of human nature, his infectious zest for life, his love of art and literature, and his devotion to family and friends. In the Encyclopedia of Psychology, assertiveness trainings. Can you see it? Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Assertiveness training was introduced by Andrew Salter and popularized by Joseph Wolpe and Arnold Lazarus. His books occupy a distinguished place in the history of clinical psychology and psychiatry. Salter's views of hypnosis as conditioning procedures was praised in an article in the New York Times, in the Time magazine, and Life magazine. I'll proceed. At the Time magazine, there's an article which doesn't show me the author, but you can, Google it. Science, Every Man His Own Svengali. About 1/4 of mankind, this is a quote, can save themselves pain and improve their own health by using hypnotism on themselves, said Andrew Salter of Manhattan last week. Then here, this is Andrew Salter and Jerry Davison with
behavior therapy, psychoanalysis, and his own distinguished and very interesting career. And Andy, a little free association. Manchurian Candidate.
Ah, Manchurian Candidate. Well, the author, Richard Condon, lived diagonally across the street from my office. And he would pop in and see me, about 8:30 or so in the morning. I never knew that he was writing the Manchurian Candidate at all. We talked about psychology in general. He was very interested in the problem of can crimes be committed under hypnosis. He asked me for, it wasn't that direct, but he asked me for readings on the subject. I gave him various papers to read, and he read them. He would come back with questions and so on. Then one day, out of so-called semi-thin air, I got a copy of the book, very suitably autographed and so on. And that was the Manchurian Candidate. The character in there of Yen Lo, the Chinese psychiatrist in the book, is modeled after me. In the movie,
Okay, I will continue. This is I don't know how many of you have seen it. I can see your hands, but the Manchurian Candidate won many prizes, and it was at that time, a very important movie. It's about US soldiers brainwashed and trained to kill without memory of guilt nor fear of being caught. The Manchurian Candidate was it's a novel written by Richard Condon and film directed by John Frankenheimer. And it's a political cliffhanger about the son of a US family who is conditioned into becoming a serial assassin for a communist conspiracy. The actors are Frank Sinatra, Janet Leigh, Lawrence Harvey, and Angela Lansbury. Very, very important movie. And here you are able to see just the
production of crime.
Or, of course, Andrew Salter's remarkable book, Conditioned Reflex Therapy, to name only 3. Or if it offends.
Now by
Okay, I can't copy much.
production of crime.
So the book is What is Hypnosis? 3 techniques. As I said, this is with the help of Clark Hull. Like I mentioned, he's a researcher in conditioning, and he helped Andrew Salter to write this book. And there are 3 techniques for auto-hypnosis. Like I mentioned, the article on Clark Hull is Hypnosis and Suggestibility, an Experimental Approach. It is a form of auto-concentration, and this is a quote of Andrew Salter. It's a form of auto-concentration. A person administers suggestions to oneself and has complete control of a trance state. The techniques are suggested for stuttering, nail biting, anesthetic for dental use, insomnia, smoking, will to diet, acting, and will to write. The other book by Andrew Salter is Conditioned Reflex Therapy, and this book has one chapter by Andrew Salter and many others. It's a compiled several articles. He talks in this book about the excitatory personality. The excitatory person is responds outwardly to the environment, sincerely likes people, introduces homework outside of the office. He was one of the first that introduced homework. All the behavioral therapies use this feature of giving homework or whatever tasks, if you want to call it, if homework you don't like the word, but some tasks to the rest of the week outside of therapy, outside of the office. Salter in this book describes General Eisenhower after an interview by the press of the victory of the European Day, which is May 8, 1945, which I really was astounded because today is May 8, 2025. But what a coincidence, right? Well, he describes, Salter describes Eisenhower saying, a well-adjusted personality. He illustrated courage, the ability to get along with people and to face them fearlessly. And that is the basis of mental health. And this is on page 40 of that book. The inhibitory personality is, on the other hand, has inhibition is a limitation. It's a disconnection from the outside. The inhibitory, this is a quote again, the inhibitory try to be everything to everybody and end up being nothing to themselves. They're always doing things they do not want to do. The inhibitory person has been trained in habit systems of inadequacy, which generate more inadequacy. So here we go again with Jerry Davison.
And I wonder if you were revising the book today, I don't know whether you've ever considered it, but if you were writing the book not in the late 40s, but writing it in the mid-90s, whether you would change the theoretical context, the theoretical framework of the description and discussion of assertiveness training techniques.
I don't think I would change the assertiveness training very much. The assertiveness training has been the reason that people have said, that's not Pavlovian. That has nothing in the world to do with Pavlov, you see. Now that is a very interesting observation.
Yes, I can continue here, but because he goes into very, let's say, in the details of conditioning, and it's beyond this, and I'm not supposed to copy all that. So I just did, let's say, a quote of the book Conditioned Reflex Therapy, where he says, our goal is to disinhibit the inhibitory, and this we attain by what may be termed verbal chemistry. Words spoken by the therapist travel along appropriate nerve tracks in the person under treatment and produce chemical modifications in the nervous system. These changes are associated with behavior changes, which in turn precipitate more biochemical modifications and more behavior changes. In that book, A Conditioned Reflex Therapy, he has 57 case studies. He writes very user-friendly, I think that's how you say it. It's easy to read if you're interested. And I give examples of the things that we've been working, or I have patients in regard to stuttering, the addictions, anxiety, of course, masochism and sex, learning and unlearning homosexuality, and the psychopathic personality. That is very interesting how he puts his ideas about the psychopathic personality. particularly for me that I've been working on that subject. So now when we talk about assertive behavior, inhibitory personalities need to express themselves more openly, share thoughts and feelings, be encouraged to use I statements. And if that, you may recall that this is one of the main, let's say, topics of the Gestalt therapy, to use the I statements. And, you know, probably maybe based on this, I'm not sure. Arnold Lazarus defined assertive behavior as social competence, the ability to say no, the ability to make contacts. So, and this is quoting again, really in a conversation I had with Anders Salter. He said, if you have the right kind of excitation, you will get the right kind of inhibition. So assertion training equal competent social functioning. It targets social deficits. And the deficits, this is the first questionnaire. There are many, if you look, you know, there are many, many questionnaires about assertion, but the first ones, the pioneer was the questionnaire assessing assertiveness by Wolpe and Lazarus in 1966. And the main techniques that were used were role playing that we discussed. You've heard many times Dr. Fay talking, Alan Fay, and modeling and cognitive restructuring of negative thoughts, and enhanced self-efficacy, which is the positive aspects, which I always mention in our talks, not only the deficits, but also the assets that a person can develop. And so I put here, and all of these can be done via video, you know, now with learning. I mean, we have so many, it's long since then, there's many things you can do using the imagery and videos and role play. Okay. So that's why I have it here. So also what is being studied in assertion training is the nonverbal attitudes, which means what are the facial, you'll know about this, facial expressions, silence, posture, physical contact, voice. We've discussed that in our conversations. So this is another researcher who's done a lot of very interesting work and later on with responsible assertive behavior by Lange and Jakubowski. And they mention different types of assertion. And you can really, well, it's the basic type of assertion, the empathic, the escalating, the confrontive, the I language, assertion, and persuasion. Each of these types of assertion, in the book of Jakubowski, you can find exercises how to do it, how to. We work a lot about teaching how, because it's a learning therapy. We teach how to do several things. So, okay, so why did it stop now again? Yes. So the basic human rights, which are mentioned also in this book, is that many more, no, but I mentioned the most important ones. We all have the same rights. We have the right to choose. Everyone has the right to make mistakes, and everyone has the responsibility to defend her or his rights. And of course, we know that. So assertion training in groups, it's the applications that have been done later on. This is, now we've left Jakubowski and Lange, and I'm talking in general what happened, the movement of assertion that unfortunately Salter was not giving enough recognition for his work. And that's why I really wanted to do this a long time ago. I mentioned I wanted to present Salter because it's not, nobody, I mean, even in our association, when you mention Salter, the younger generation does not know who he is. So I figured that's important to bring it up again. The pioneers are, they really struggled. So what happened later on is that they had consciousness raising in women's and men's groups. Then they use it for job interviewing, for business management, for secondary and elementary education, and you see later on something that I used, and professional organizations. So it actually, the first wave of the feminist movement did support, did mention the work of Andrew Salter, and in the assertive training groups, they defend their one's own rights. They affirm self-worth and equanimity in relationships. They target social anxiety, aggression, excessive people-pleasing. And in these groups, you also can do modeling, behavioral rehearsal, and communication analysis in mental health patients, also in ethnic and cultural minorities, and in abusive relationships. Also in group assertion training, I know it's a group psychotherapy conference, and I never mentioned it, but I did a lot of group work in my country. I even have a book on group therapy, but well, that's another story. So the group assertion training, first of all, they learn the difference between assertion and aggression, and the difference between non-assertion and politeness, and to help identify the personal rights and the rights of others, and to reduce cognitive and affective obstacles to act assertively, for example, in anxiety, anger, guilt, and irrational thoughts. And for Wolpe, for example, anxiety was, assertion was a way of inhibiting anxiety. It's mentioned in his books and his work, but this is not the topic of this presentation. So the current status of assertive training, first, we need to recognize the work and the book of Lazarus and our own Alan Fay in the book, I Can If I Want To. That's one of the books that it's out there. It's been there since 1971. Then there is Ratus, where they have the Ratus scale, assertive behavior through video-mediated assertive models. It's a very important work. The Ratus has, like I said, a questionnaire also. I mentioned Jakubowski with her book, in his book of Responsible Assertive Behavior. Then Dick Heimberg from Philadelphia, Cognitive and Behavioral Models of Assertive Behavior, which is more recent, and Assertive Training, a Forgotten Evidence-Based Treatment. And I need to include here, of course, you had Marvin Goldfried who gave us a talk about this. So, well, with the influence of Salter, then I was invited in Venezuela at the Jewish school, the Hebraica Molarli Luces. They had problems with discipline, severe problems with discipline. And one day the director of the school, she said, would you help me with the discipline in our primary school? And I said, well, I'm happy to do so, but let me do a pilot study. And she said, no, it has to be the whole 567 students. And I like challenges. So believe it or not, I did it 90% by myself. But of course, one of the psychologists there, out of that group, but she humanist actually, helped me in the question. It's a long story, but a very good story, because we published that in the Psychology International, and it was very, I don't want to use the word successful, but it was effective. Discipline got much better in that school for sure. And they still remember when they see me in Harvard, you know. So, and I also, at that time right before when I was meeting Salter, I met him, and I was writing this book, Manual of Emotions. And I said, do you think you would be willing to do the foreword to my book, Manual of Emotions? And he said, yes, of course. And he sent me a fax, which is a bit vintage already, but it says, obviously in English, but I transcribed it on the left side. It says, you are not born to be depressed and unhappy, said Epictetus. Now, 2,000 years later, a wise and practical psychologist gives us a book who shows us exactly what we can do to help us attain happiness. Not high-blown theory, but down-to-earth down-to-earth advice of practical immediacy is what Court gives us in this easy, readable book. Every page shows hard-won experience, and everything she says comes right out of the cutting edge of modern psychology. So the book, Conditioning Therapies, that is a more really for people that are working in Pavlovian conditioning. They have very fine contributors here, and Salter just contributed in that book with, in the first section, the first part, which said the therapeutic challenge, the theory and practice of conditioned reflex therapy. So the main goal is the direct expression of positive and negative emotions. This will improve a wide variety of psychological disorders. Emphasis in changing overt behavior rather than thoughts and feelings. And I mentioned these are the researchers that are mentioned in the book. So, oh yeah, I wanted to give before I wanted to tell you, to warn you that this is one of Andrew Salter's book, A Case Against Psychoanalysis. He was attacked very much by the zeitgeist, you know, that when he initiated his ideas together with Wolpe and Lazarus. So that was a time where they were very much attacked. And I lived it because I went with Wolpe to the ground rounds and they were attacked furiously. So I bought the book and you can see that it's a bit used. And he said he dedicated the book for Felicitas Core with the friendly greetings and muchas felicidades, Andrew Salter. But the book, believe it or not, this book hit the Life magazine. And in the Life magazine, they published the chapter 1, the whole chapter 1, The Twilight of Psychoanalysis. And let me pass that quickly so that I hope you're breathing deeply. So anyway, I'm joking. I like to use humor. I have someone in the group that taught me how to use humor, right? So in psychotherapy, that's one in page 40, he says, in psychotherapy, people either get better or they do not. And it happens quickly, slowly, or not at all. Everything else is detailed and is of no interest to the patient, however significant it may be to the therapist. So again, this brought on a very important, also an article by Rollo May in the New York Times in 1952, where he says the target is Freud, the case against psychoanalysis. And in that article, really, if you read it, it's also everything, you know, nowadays you can search it. He really is, describes the futility of that book, and I won't go into the details here at the end. Actually, he mentions Rollo May that that's a reaction to the zeitgeist, to the situation that they were being attacked. So you can search it if you like. Then here.
And that's not playing with words. That the analysts, in wanting to straighten out their potential analysts there, are right. The only catch is that the way they straighten them out is the net result just leaves them with very little, in my opinion.
Let me follow that up, if I may, with a question that you just said triggers in my mind. People write these days about the gap between theory and practice, the gap between what a therapist says he or she is doing and why, on the one hand, and what they actually do in their consulting room. Do you feel that gap, that disjunction in your own work? Do you see it in the work of others? You think if someone were a fly on the wall in your sessions in this room, would they know that they're watching Salter, who wrote Conditioned Reflex Therapy, or would they wonder, where is he getting these actions from? How is he coming up with these techniques that he's using?
They would know that this is the same fellow who wrote that. Joe Wolpe called CRT gently, quote, flamboyant. My style is not remotely flamboyant. It is just self-expressive. The Journal of the AMA called my hypnosis book well-written. Aldous Huxley called it well-written. A Nobel Prize winner called Thomas Mann used a wonderful word. He said, captivatingly written. Isn't that an odd and wonderful word? Captivatingly written. Nabokov read the case against analysis, I quote the real Nabokov word, with glee. But forgive me, Jerry, I'd love to read to you the most remarkable quote about what was said about conditioned reflex therapy. I do believe I have it here. Good grief. That goes to show you that beliefs are not everything here. Apparently not.
Yes, I stopped that because it's a long letter and it would not. I'm not sure that I'm permitted to copy all that. You know, it was extensive, so I left it at that. But that's how described his work. How people have thought about his work, important literature. And here you see the founders of the Association of the Advancement of Behavioral Cognitive Therapies. You can see on the extreme left, and you can read Salter and Krasner. I think that was where Phil had training, I think, and Joseph Wolpe and Edward Demgroff and Lazarus and Cyril Frank. Those are the founders. So the last slide I did it, I think, in a very good faith. Just I was impressed. I was at the Museum of Freud in Vienna, and I found this very interesting. That it's not easy to deal scientifically with feelings. So thank you very much, and we can stop share.